Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Jupiter's square to Saturn, which is happening over the weekend. Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, where it is traditionally exalted. Saturn is in the sign of Aries, where it is traditionally in the sign of its fall. Saturn is in the superior position, placing a bit of pressure on Jupiter. So what does that mean? We're also going to talk about the cycle of Jupiter and Saturn, and we're going to be covering more of that tomorrow to round off the week, and trying to also place this Jupiter-Saturn square next to the Mars-Uranus square that's happening over the weekend. So there's a bit more work to do both today and tomorrow to make sure that we're really approaching all of these very significant transits from a well-rounded point of view. But today, I've got some things to watch for given the square and the dignities of the square and the specifics, which I'll explain in more detail as we go as well. So that's our agenda for today. Before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. It's my hope that this channel will be a home for your daily spiritual practice of astrology alongside whatever else you do to take care of yourself. And you can always find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. We have a couple of things that I'm promoting right now. If you go over to the website, click on events, we have a summer solstice event taking place, in-person event in Minneapolis on the 21st. Just RSVP to let us know you're coming. We're going to have an evening of meditation and sharing around the summer solstice. Go down to speaker series, and you will see that the last of our speaker series talks is taking place this weekend with Krista Hamilton on the Decans. That is free to for all of you, thanks to your generosity and support of the Kickstarter. You register for that, you get the link to attend later if you can't make it to the live event. Go to Live Talks, you'll see my next talk is coming up on the 19th, Uranus in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius. I've titled this talk, When New Objects Appear in the Sky. I'm really excited to be diving into this very historic trine that's taking place between these two outer planets. Yet another major outer planetary dynamic that is starting to form in 2025. If you can't attend the live webinar with the link we send you, you also get the recording afterward. Remember that we have just this week and next left. You have just a little over a week left to register for our upcoming class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It's a one-year course in ancient Hellenistic astrology, 30 classes on the year. We have tutoring staff that hosts breakout study sessions in between our major units of study. There's a Q&A and discussion portion of each talk. We have an interactive group forum discussion staffed with tutors as well throughout the year. Tons of bonus material. You can take the certification track if you're wanting to practice with other people, but a lot of times people just take this for their own personal enrichment. At the end of today's talk, you will find an informational video about the program. You can listen to more to understand everything the program includes, and I take you over to the course website, all that good stuff. Be sure at the bottom with the registration options to check out the need-based tuition. If you are someone who could use a little help, you need a little bit of a flexible pricing point, maybe the currency, the exchange rate, or whatever is high if you're in another country, or you're just, you're in a tough spot financially at the moment. We know a lot of people are going through some hard times right now, so please do take advantage of that. It's been there. This is our 15th year and 30th program, 2 per year for 15 years we've done. And we've always kind of prided ourselves on making sure that we have an accessible price point for people who can't afford our going rate. So make sure that you use that if you need it. All right. Now, on that note, let's turn our attention to the real-time clock, where I'm going to highlight for all of you the Jupiter-Saturn dynamic that is unfolding this weekend. We've talked about this week in a couple of different ways, but so far we have really been, we looked at the weekly overview. We talked a little bit about this. We started talking about Mars-Uranus. We looked at the full moon in Sagittarius ruled by this Jupiter-Saturn dynamic. Today, what I want to do is break down what we can expect from the particular dignity signatures of these planets. So let me just get my clock. My clock is off right now. Here we go. So Thursday, June 12th, that is today, Jupiter newly arrived in Cancer since about the 9th. And you'll see that what's happening is Jupiter is moving directly into a square with Saturn. Very closely after that, it's going to square Neptune. We'll be talking about that next week. But Jupiter square to Saturn takes place this weekend. If we roll forward to Sunday, June 15th, you'll see that the two planets are exactly square. This is about 10 6:35 in the morning Central Daylight Time. That's where I'm located in Minneapolis, but you get the idea. It's Sunday morning, and the two planets in a square are also featuring some very particular signatures because of their dignities. So I'm going to remove everything that we're looking at except for Jupiter and Saturn so that I can highlight those for you. Here we go. So within this dynamic, kind of looking at the wheel from any position, if you imagine that you're Saturn and you're a person standing and facing into the center of the wheel, if the aspect is going toward your right-hand side, in this case it is, that would put you in the superior position. In ancient astrology, within any aspect dynamic, there is typically a planet in a superior position and an inferior position. And it doesn't mean better or worse. It typically means one is asserting its nature more strongly onto the other and not the other way around. So in this case, Saturn is sort of asserting its nature onto Jupiter more strongly than Jupiter is asserting its nature onto Saturn. That dynamic is typical with squares, sextiles, trines. The opposition doesn't take part in that inferior superior distinction because the two planets are directly across the wheel from one another. So, and conjunctions we don't look at technically as an aspect in ancient astrology at all, but more on that another time. So within this dynamic, the point is Saturn is in the superior position over Jupiter. What might that mean given that Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, but Saturn is in its fall in the sign of Aries? I want to look at that today and give you 5 things to watch for given the square. Now, I also want to note that what we're going to be doing tomorrow to round off the week is a little bit of historical tracking. I want to go back to the conjunction that occurred between these two planets just right now, very briefly, to kind of remind you about what was taking place. Here we are in December of 2020, right about at the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. Jupiter and Saturn conjoined at the 0-degree marker of Aquarius. So what we're going to do is we're going to outline the stages of the synodic cycle between Jupiter and Saturn tomorrow. This way you can track out the development of these two planets over a longer sweep of time. That for many people is really, really important to do if you want to get the deeper benefit of understanding their cyclical dynamic. It's not just a square that's happening right now. It's the first quarter square of a cycle that began in December of 2020. I'm also going to outline for you tomorrow the different phases of this opening square that have already occurred so that you can track the development from starting point through the first two stages of the square, and this being the final phase of the square. It makes sense to track all of that with a little broader sweep because, again, this is a cycle that for thousands of years has been an kind of epic historical cycle that astrologers have tracked. So we're going to do some of that tracking work tomorrow. Today, again, what I want to focus on is just 5 things to watch for given this combination with Saturn kind of pushing onto Jupiter a bit more strongly than Jupiter's pushing onto Saturn, given that Saturn is in its fall in Aries, given that Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. What do those dynamics mean for us? What are the archetypal signatures that we can watch for? So here's the first thing that I want to suggest, and they're all a little different. And by the way, I always love hearing from you guys. If you have anything to add to this list as we go along, if you've got a way of thinking about it that comes to you, please do share it because it's always fascinating to see what delineations you guys come up with. Number 1, this is a fallen Saturn and an exalted Jupiter. And so one of the ways we might look at this creatively is that Saturn needs help. When Saturn is impressing itself in a superior square upon Jupiter, it might seem like Saturn is being a little demanding or aggressive or even domineering. But with a fallen Saturn, it could very well be that the reason for that pressing or pushing of the agenda, because Saturn is in its fall, might literally mean that Saturn is in need of help. Saturn is a wounded Saturn. Let me give you an example. Let's say that Saturn in Aries represents a solar figure that is experiencing hardship. A father, a leader, doesn't have to be male, it could be, any gender, whatever. But imagine a leader or a position, someone in a position of power or authority that is sick, or that maybe has hit rock bottom and needs to go to rehab. The broken Saturn, the fallen Saturn, could be seen as someone that is of an older age, incapacitated, or no longer to do something that they used to be able to do. Saturn in Aries could be about a lack of mobility that requires some caretaking, or an illness or a sickness that requires a nurturing, devoted, maternal figure. Again, doesn't really, sex gender to me is super fluid with all of this. So, but a Jupiter in Cancer that has all of those caring, devotional, sensitive qualities. Saturn in Aries might represent the child that is being abused and put into the foster care system, and Jupiter in Cancer could be the embrace of a new family that says, you're safe here, come in and be loved. So this is just one way of conceptualizing that Saturn in Aries can represent especially things that are supposed to be fiery or young, or maybe a leader or a father, something solar or something martial that's supposed to be strong, or that's supposed to be central and important and capable, that might suddenly be falling on hard times and therefore need the care, the nurturance, the shelter, the safety of this big, warm-hearted Jupiter in Cancer. So again, what are we doing? Are we saying like this is the letter of the law? No, we're providing an archetypal interpretation of the dignities and the pressure of Saturn in the superior position. So play with that and see if you notice anything like that popping up in your life. Even those parts of ourselves psychologically, it's like there's like an inner council that we keep, and there's different voices and people on that inner council. Maybe there's one that's lacking confidence that needs the embrace of a warm, nurturing figure within. So these could be internal dynamics, but watch for them around you or in the lives of people you're close with or in the workplace. See if you notice anything like this taking place. Number 2, Saturn is placing pressure on Jupiter. So let's say that ideally, Jupiter in Cancer is about providing a lush, fertile, warm, abundant, supportive, vital kinds of things. I think about the environment that a family tries to create at home when they know they're going to be bringing a baby home from the midwifing center, the hospital, the doula, wherever you're going. Like maybe you have your birth at home too, but you're preparing an environment like a nest for the new life that's coming home. So imagine now that Saturn is placing pressure on that environment to host more than maybe it was expecting to host. Oh, surprise, surprise, you're having twins. you know what I mean? I'm making this up off the top of my head, literally, but imagine that Saturn in Aries provides like a burden, a pressure, a duty, a responsibility, a kind of hard, unexpected fact. Like you have twins. You weren't expecting that. That suddenly places a great pressure on what you're designing as the nest at home. Oh my gosh, now we need 2 cribs, or now we need more food and diapers and the supplies and everything like that. Now we're going to need some help from more caregivers. I might have to take time off from work. So you can feel how Saturn in Aries provides, like, it pushes and places a pressure on Jupiter. So I like to think about Saturn as being wounded and needing something, but another way of conceptualizing it is not really that anything's wounded or in need of help, but that there's a burden or a pressure that Saturn may place on Jupiter. Jupiter is a great provider in the sign of Cancer, but the providing for Saturn could be a little intense. Like what Saturn requires or what Saturn is asking for might be a little more than what. Now, Jupiter's well-resourced, right? It's exalted. So the capacity Jupiter has to meet the demand or expectation or pressure that Saturn places on it in this dynamic, I think is pretty good. But still, watch for, if it's not a kind of wounded Saturn, then maybe it's a Saturn with a strong ask or a lot more duty responsibility than you were expecting. And there's maybe the need to creatively pivot in order to accommodate the pressure that's coming through. Now, number 3, this is a little bit more intense. See, we're ramping it up as we go. I don't want people to think that this is the super scary transit that you have to be really freaked out by. But the truth is that Saturn could also be in a position to sort of harm Jupiter. Now, what I mean by that is that let's say Saturn in Aries can be oppressive and sort of tyrannical. I mentioned maybe it was a week or two ago that Saturn in Aries in high school for me showed up pretty strongly in my historical tracking in right along the lines of some bullying that I experienced in high school. Saturn in Aries can be an oppressive or actively kind of bullying, domineering, severe, almost like a combative or aggressive energy that's also sort of strict and weighty. Like I think of someone who might be really martial and really strict and oppressive, like a dad that runs the house like a drill sergeant. Something kind of like that image that comes to my mind. Imagine Saturn then potentially inflicting harm upon someone or something that is more vulnerable, or where there's more, like, I think, for example, Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn can be something that harms things like women, mothers, home, safety, children, places that are supposed to be just they're a little bit more fragile or vulnerable. And Saturn in Aries can present as something threatening, attacking, harming the Jupiter in Cancer picture. Another example of this to me would be some kind of excessive or unlawful use of authority to oppress a group of people, right? That kind of thing can step up around something like this. Jupiter in Cancer can represent a village or a community, and maybe things are happening in a local government that's going to provide a real burden or a problem for a community. So you get, and obviously you can extrapolate from this into the news or whatever. I'm not going to comment on that stuff, but you can feel the presence of Saturn as something that might be kind of punitive or heavy or strict, that provides a burden for something that's supposed to be a refuge of safety, like a community, like a civic, social, cultural ecosystem of some kind. So these are the things we have to be careful of. I don't like talking about the super heavy stuff, but it's important not to whitewash the transit either. This is a real difficulty that can show up. Number 4, and this one I really like, because I think this is something that it's sort of subtle and nuanced philosophically, but it's very important that we understand. Saturn is a planet associated with winter and the underworld, the exalted in the sign of the fall equinox, where the light enters the underworld. That was conceptualized as a place of the harvest, reaping what's been sown, judging and evaluating results of the soul in the underworld and the rebirth process, and the evaluation of a soul's karma, all of that associated with Saturn. Also, the winter signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, as seen from the northern hemisphere, are signs in which Saturn is the ruler. This process of descending into death and darkness, Saturn represents that natural part of the wheel of fortune in the world where things live and grow and then they die. They fade away. They're impermanent. They reach old age. They reach the limit of their mortal life. And then in that sense, they have also served their purpose. So the closer we get to the end of something, the greater the wisdom is that is available to us. This is why we often turn to our elders for insight, because they're closer to death. They've seen a lot. They've been through a lot. They have this kind of 20,000 foot view of having gone through everything. So Saturn is such a planet of wisdom. And in the cycle with Jupiter, it is the limits, the endings, the deaths, the negations, the no's, the hitting of a wall or a barrier in relation to Jupiter that provides a starting point for new forms of understanding, new realizations, wisdom that becomes embodied and starts redirecting our life in new ways, specifically because we've reached a point of finality. We've hit that wintry Saturn. Well, so watch for negations, limits, endings that are giving us a lot of wisdom, giving us a lot of insight, and maybe providing us a template for the next stage of life. This is the overarching meaning of Jupiter, Saturn in their cycle with one another always. So this is interesting, though, because Saturn in the sign of Aries in its fall, one of the reasons for that is that you're taking Saturn, the god of winter, death, the underworld, endings, limitations, that vast view that comes toward the end of life, and you're placing Saturn in the sign of spring, of youth, of new beginnings. The takeover of light that happens in Aries is sort of contrary to the fundamental nature of Saturn. But what that means is also that things that are young, new, starting off, with the square to Jupiter in Cancer, another very fertile, growth-oriented sign, could provide very frustrating initial blocks, delays, or setbacks for whatever Jupiter is trying to grow in our life. Jupiter in Cancer is, again, a very fertile placement for Jupiter. Jupiter loves to, it's super creative in the sign of Cancer. Just by that, I mean things that grow and start developing, like seeds you plant in a garden. They just take off because there's rain and it's got all the right conditions. Jupiter in Cancer loves to grow things. The square to Saturn in Aries, a planet that represents death in the sign of the first birth of light, can be about things that struggle to be born, things that struggle in initial or early stages of development. And so we have to be very patient with this square because new things are coming through, but there may be initial or temporary setbacks, frustrations, delays, or even prohibitions that sort of say, aha, like not yet, fool. It's like you're starting off on the Oregon Trail, but Billy has typhoid and you've not even left, the village. You've got to deal with these initial blocks to the first early stages of something. The image that comes to my mind, and I don't mean this at all to be like frightening, please don't take it literally. Someone that I know in my life very, very recently had to, their what is it called? Their baby came a preemie. I think that's what they call them. So it's like a premature birth, and they had to be in the NICU for a couple of weeks. This is a perfect Saturn and Aries example, where the early stage of life is colored by the threat. Is it going to, she was very nervous. They were very positive at the hospital. Like, this is fine. It's not going to be here very long. Everything's stable. Like, you avoided like worst case scenarios. But still, think of the anxiety of a mom. If any of you have ever been to a NICU or had friends who have that, like, what a scary experience it is. Like, this is just starting. You got to be kidding me. Can we save the stress until puberty or something? It's like, oh my God. But anyway, that initial feeling of it's sort of tentative and fragile, and the beginning feels a little fraught with difficulty or uncertainty, or it's that, but we weren't prepared for this, and now I have to accommodate a pressure that's coming in, or something in the beginning sort of feeling blocked or delayed, and it shouldn't, because it's supposed to be young and fresh. So anyway, play with all of these symbols, add to it. You can see the way I'm working with the dignities. I hope that you then have the creative license to play with them as well. Feel free to put some into the comment section. I'd love to hear from you guys. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to give you guys a demonstration of a couple of horary astrology charts, because our horary program is beginning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you, the horary program starts on Saturday the 21st. Some of you may be interested in studying horary astrology. So if you are, you want to stick around and watch me demo a few horary charts, a few key concepts, how it works, why I think learning horary is valuable. And if you feel like joining, I'll also tell you that the class is really open to anyone who already has a traditional background. So if you've studied Hellenistic, medieval, Renaissance, kind of like anything in the traditional vein, if you have a background in that already, then hopping into horary is not going to be super complicated for you. But if you don't, then I highly recommend starting with the year 1 program. The informational video is going to be tagged on to the very end of this video, so you can still learn more about that. That starts June 22nd. But some of you may be interested in horary, so what I'm going to do is pause briefly, show you some horary charts, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Okay, so first of all, what is horary astrology? So horary is considered one of the traditional branches of astrology, and it is one of our full year programs that we offer at Nightlight. We have a first year program in the basics of ancient Hellenistic astrology, a second year program in timing techniques and forecasting, a third year program in counseling. We also have a horary program, which I believe adds a tremendous amount of depth, detail, and like extra skill to your predictive capacities as an astrologer. It is a traditional predictive technique that is sort of a branch of its own. And it begins when someone asks the astrologer an outcome, sort of yes or no based question. Simple, and concrete. For example, in this first chart I'm going to show you, the question was, will I find my dog? Will it come home? Or is the dog dead? So this is someone who had been missing their dog for a while. This is a very common type of horary question. Another question that we're going to look at today is, will we get into a committed relationship with each other? These kinds of targeted, concrete, specific, predictive questions, Horary has a very unique capacity to answer through its time-tested techniques and its craft. So when you study Horary, what you're studying is how these charts are made and how they are read to determine an outcome. Every Horary chart that is cast is a sort of like a birth chart for a question. So when someone emails me, will my dog come home? I take the timestamp of the email and the way that I do it. There's different approaches you can use. It's a sort of divinatory approach, the way similar to the way you might flip cards at the time that someone asks a question. The chart is set from the time that the diviner or astrologer gets the question and from their location. And so we're sort of intervening and speaking to the oracle on behalf of someone. So someone comes to me and says, will my dog come home or is it deceased? May 30th, 2:05 p.m. in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live. I cast the chart for that moment. And then I read the chart using a series of techniques that are specific to each different type of question that is asked. And part of learning Horary is about learning all of that and also learning which techniques need to be applied based on the type of question that's being asked. So in this class, that's what you learn over the course of a year. It is a very hands-on class in the sense that I'll teach you concepts and then we will actively work on charts in a group. It is a technique and an approach that takes a while to learn because there's a lot at stake, like predictive questions, and there's a whole realm of ethics that we explore in terms of what questions are appropriate and what aren't, how to answer questions, how to convey your insights while still being humble. It's a whole different level of skill set that's needed when something more concretely predictive is taking place in astrology as opposed to something archetypal or psychological. So anyway, let me show you this chart. This is a Horary chart that recently came in through my practice. This is, will my dog come home? So in this chart, we have someone asking a question, and whoever is the person asking the question, we call the querent. They will always receive the ruler of the ascending sign. Now, in Horary, because much of the techniques and methods of Horary were developed at a time when astrologers began using quadrant-based house divisions, this is the only course I teach that utilizes a quadrant-based form of house division because so many of the rules and nuances of Horary take place within that paradigm. So you'll see me using Regiomontanus houses. It's pretty flexible in terms of which quadrant-based system you use. But you'll learn in this class that a lot of the techniques we apply are taking place in quadrant, as opposed to all of the natal work I teach in whole sign and Hellenistic approach. So here in this chart, we have Mercury as the planet that is representing our querent. And we also typically give the moon to the querent as a co-significator. So sometimes a missing person or animal will also be given the moon, but in this case, we're actually going to give the ruler of the 6th house to the dog. And so the ruler of the 6th will become a small animal. We see that as Saturn in Aries in the 7th house. The querent is Mercury and the moon. So in a chart like this, what we would do to start off with is check and see, first and foremost, what kind of shape does the dog look like it's in? Well, Saturn has recently, very recently, in this Horary picture, entered its fall. The dignity of the animal is therefore connected to the dignity of the planet, and we might say something, you could be as literal as saying that the dog has fallen and hurt itself, or that the dog has died because it's entered its fall, or that the dog is injured. But whatever we can say, the fact that the dog has just recently entered the sign of the fall would typically mean that the dog has either passed or is in really like rough condition. Maybe it's sick, maybe it injured itself while being out in the in the world outside of its comfortable home. But then I want to look more carefully to see if it has had contact with the ruler of the eighth house. That would be Mars in this case. And Mars and Saturn, although Mars is now in its fall, Saturn is now in its fall in Mars's sign, which would further suggest, since Mars is the ruler of the eighth house, that Saturn is at the very least moving toward more of a life or death state, probably not well at the very best. There's no contact with Mars, nor has there been recently. And so we can probably imagine that, if there had been, the dog probably would have been deceased. We would need to see probably an unprohibited recent aspect with Mars to suggest that the animal had passed. We don't see that. We do see that Saturn is in its fall, sort of beholden to Mars, which to me would indicate probably that if the animal is coming home or is found, that it's not going to be in the best condition. But the next thing we need to see in terms of retrieval, they're actively looking for the dog. They had drones out. They had a search dog out. They had all sorts of stuff trying to look for this beloved animal. We would want to see one of the querent signifiers finding the animal or getting in touch with it. And so what do we see? We see the moon at 29 degrees of Cancer, about to cross over in less than a degree into 0 Aries, or 0 Leo, where it will immediately trine Saturn. That is a very good picture of someone potentially finding and being reunited with their animal. And so because of that applying trine, there isn't an aspect with the other signifier of our querent, Mercury, just the moon and Saturn, but that's enough. The upcoming unprohibited trine between those two planets, meaning nothing else gets in the way of those two connecting immediately, suggests you will find your dog. However, what state is that dog going to be in? That's questionable with Saturn, the dog, having recently entered its fall. So I heard back from this person, and after about 10 days, multiple sightings, and a search dog, a drone that they took out looking for this animal, they were reunited with the animal, but the animal was severely dehydrated. I thought that was interesting, leaving Pisces and entering its fall in Aries, that it would go from water to a fire sign where it's debilitated. It was on the verge of like death due to dehydration, and was also pretty sickly. Thankfully not like injured, but they're doing a bunch of tests, and the animal was in really rough shape. But they found the dog, were reunited, and it was like off to the animal hospital. And from everything I've heard, things were looking good. Like we should be able to get some IV fluids in the dog and things like that. So that is an example of the power of Horary to deliver really a message of hope, and it was accurate. Not only that, but in that chart, Saturn was located in the 7th house. And I said, look to the west. That is the direction that Saturn would represent in the 7th, in the western direction. And the scent that the search dog followed was directly west of their home, and ended up being west of their home. So even little details like that in Horary can be just really magical. Now I want to show you another example. Will we get into a relationship? The dog chart, like I get a lot of missing animals, missing items. And honestly, they are one of the harder types of Horaries, because sometimes it's like, it's like you're looking for a needle in a haystack. And often a lot of missing animal charts don't turn out so nice, because God knows a lot of them don't come home, so. But anyway, here is, will we get into a relationship? So in this question, we assign the ascendant ruler to Mars. This was asked in March of this year. And Venus gets the 7th house ruler. So the person is asking, will I get into a relationship with someone that they're interested in? And they think the other person has interest, but they kind of wanting to know if this thing will form. Now, the querent asking the question gets Mars, and of course, again, they get the moon as their co-significator. We do that for just about every type of horary question. The person asking the question will get the ascendant ruler and the moon. And then the 7th house ruler in this case is going to be represented by Venus. And so what we need to see is unprohibited aspectual connection between the moon and Mars, moon or Mars, and Venus. That aspect would show the connection taking place. Well, we can see that Mars is at 17, Venus is at 10, but retrograde, which means the two are separating, not coming together. So that's not super great because it suggests, yeah, no, you're moving apart, not together. However, when we look at the moon, what's really interesting is the moon is at 9 degrees of Gemini, about to make a sextile to Venus at 10 degrees. So an unprohibited upcoming sextile between the co-significator, the moon, and Venus. However, one thing to note here is that Venus is debilitated by sign and by house. A sextile like this that has zero reception between the planets in terms of their essential dignity is sort of weak. And so I said, I do think that there will be further opportunities for connection, but I would be surprised if a really substantive long-term relationship formed. And that is indeed the way things turned out. So again, these are just super simple examples of horary. You can use horary for things like who will win an election or a sports contest or a court, like a custody case. There's so many interesting things. Will a remedy that I'm taking or a therapy I'm using as an approach have a good effect on me? All sorts of horary questions. Will I get the job? Sometimes the horary questions are deeper and like weightier. And so there's horary can be something that sometimes people are a little scared to approach. I think that fear is good because it keeps us humble. And if you pair a sensitive, careful, thoughtful use of horary alongside of a natal practice, what I've seen is that practitioners of natal astrology get a lot better with respect to how they see a chart, being able to see planetary dynamism and see things that aspects represent that are more concrete. Like when you start seeing sextiles as examples of a date that it takes place, but the lack of reception means that it's a nice date, but nothing really comes of it. You start developing like an imagery in your head for the moving dynamics of planets that are more translatable into everyday life. And that's the skill that a lot of people get from horary that you really can't get from anywhere else. There's nothing as immediate and pressing and literal as horary charts. So anyway, if you're interested, the class starts on the 21st. Go to the Nightlight Astrology website, click on the courses tab. You'll see the horary course down there. The only thing I say to people is you need to know aspects, you need to know houses. We're not teaching you astrology, we're teaching you a specific approach to astrology. So you need to already have a background in aspects, transits, essential dignities. So you need a background in traditional astrology already. Now, if you don't have that, stick around because I'm going to sign off now, and there's an informational video about the Year 1 program. Most of our students go through the Year 1 program, and then at the end of Year 1, we'll take Year 2 and Horary, which always begin every June. So if you started Year 1 this June, next June, you could take them because they meet on alternating weekends at the same time slot, the Year 2 and the Horary program. So a lot of people pair them up together as they're going into their second year of study at Nightlight. Anyway, if you have questions about any of it, feel free to email us info@nightlightastrology.com. I hope that this was a useful exercise today overall. And again, more on the Year 1 program next. Bye, everyone. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology that begins at the end of June. June 22nd is our starting date. I'm going to take you over to the course page to tell you more about the program and what you will learn while you are in it. So here we go over to the Nightlight Astrology website. You can find this at nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses tab, go to the first year course. Now this program is ideal for people who maybe have a little bit of background already in astrology. Maybe you've done some studying on your own independently, taken some courses or webinars and workshops, but you're looking to deepen your understanding of astrology. And maybe Hellenistic astrology in particular has been calling to you. I'll tell you more about what Hellenistic astrology is in a minute, but on the first year course page, you're going to find everything that the course includes. I want to make the structure of the course clear first, And then at the end, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons that I think anyone might have for studying astrology, and you can see if you check any of those boxes. First of all, there are 30 classes on the year. It's just a little under a year-long program with 30 webinars. Every webinar is 2 to 3 hours long, including a lively Q&A and conversational section after we finished our lesson for the day. Each of those lessons I lead personally through live webinars, so you can attend those live. If you want to follow along at your own pace in your own time on your own schedule, you can always look at the recordings and take those in. And I'm going to show you what the class page looks like so you can see how you can interact with the course as uniquely and creatively as you want to. But you can either attend the live webinars or listen to the recordings or audio or video. In between major units of study within those 30 classes, we have separate classes outside of the 30 classes that are essentially tutoring sessions led by our staff, our course directors. We have 3 of them for our first-year program, 3 tutors that help me guide every single class you're in and lead study sessions, and are also staffing an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions, look at charts, practice what you're learning with all of your classmates and with tutors there to help you. They'll always answer questions within a business day. So it's a really well-staffed, well-structured program. In between those major units of study and the breakout sessions, we also have guest speakers that come in throughout the year that you get free access to. The recordings are archived for you in your class folders. So you're getting people within our curriculum. And you're also getting to visit with some astrologers who are outside of the Nightlight School, but we really admire their work, and so we bring them in. You also have a ton of bonus material. With every lesson, we have recommended quizzes, study guides, optional reading. And that allows people who are really, really, intense, deep, like studious types to go as far as you want to with the material, while other people who are maybe, content to take things in at, just kind of taking in the classes, that's there for you too. So you can kind of go as deeply as you want to. The class, as the year goes on, goes through major units of study in ancient Hellenistic astrology. So if you're not familiar with ancient Hellenistic astrology, this is the earliest form of horoscopic astrology. This is where the astrology that you've probably learned today comes from originally. And that makes some of its features unique. Like, for example, ancient astrologers utilized whole sign houses. We study why they used whole sign houses, how they used them, and we study the why behind really everything: houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, essential and accidental dignities, delineation approaches. How do you read and predict within a natal chart? All of those theoretical areas of astrology, we not only learn how to do, but we learn the why behind it. And this is what I think people find most empowering about the course, is that ancient astrology really helps to give you the rationale for everything so that you have the insight available to go off script. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're learning about a sign, Aries or Taurus or a Gemini, something like that. Ancient astrology won't just give you a list of the adjectives or keywords or descriptions of, say, a sign or a planet. It will give you an underlying philosophical explanation that then allows you to extrapolate from it the kinds of lists that you read in textbooks, which means you'll have an understanding of why everything on a list in a textbook is there in the first place. And you'll also have the insight and creativity available to add things to the list that are a part of your own unique intuition and contribution to astrology. And this is what ancient astrologers wanted students of astrology to learn: the why behind everything. So this is a class where, even though you're seeing things like planet signs, houses, dignities, aspects, and you're like, oh, I've already learned about those things. Not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology. I don't mean to sound condescending, but like, truly, most people's experience coming through this program is, wow, I had no idea all that I didn't know about the roots of everything that I've understood thus far about astrology. So it really is about digging into the philosophical core of why we do everything. And then you have greater intuitive and creative capacity as an astrological craftsman or craftswoman. So anyway, that's a brief explanation of why I think Hellenistic astrology is important. Not to mention that ancient astrology was really focused on our ability to accurately describe and predict things in the realm of karma, fate, and destiny. Whereas modern astrology's hallmark and strength is psychological depth. And so when you put the two together in our program, which is why it's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, I think you have something really special. So on that note, you can see everything that we cover here. So there's a video with some of our alumni you can watch. Everything is there on the page. Now, there are 5 reasons that I want to touch on briefly before I tell you about your payment options and need-based tuition. These are 5 reasons to study astrology that if you mark any of these boxes, especially if you mark several of them, then I think it's a good indication that you might be ideal for this program, might be an ideal fit. So the first one is if you find that astrology has become a part of your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly spiritual practice, it is a part of how you lead an inner life, then there is nothing more empowering than deepening your connection to that language, because that puts you more in the driver's seat. It's always good to have astrologers that you rely on, teachers that you listen to, get a little objective perspective, especially when you're looking at your own chart through a reading. But there's really nothing more empowering than learning to speak the language at a deeper level for yourself. And if that calls to you, if you want to understand things and be able to speak more confidently and clearly about this sacred language that you love, and this is a great reason to take a structured program. Number 2 is that you feel called to read charts for people. And look, not everyone who takes our programs is on a professional track, but we have 4 years worth of professional training programs at Nightlight that will prepare you to read professionally for others if that's the path that you're on. Maybe you don't even know if you're on that path. That's fine too. Many people take our programs just for the sake of their own personal enrichment, and again, to be kind of more in the driver's seat with respect to your astrological journey. You have more of an understanding. You can be more confident in reading symbols and experiencing transits with your own understanding that you've cultivated. But sometimes people want to read for other people. This will definitely set you up to do that. We have a certification track where you can take exams at the end of every year. They're optional. You don't have to if you're not on that level of interest. Number 3, you have done a lot of self-study. You've heard things from here and there, but you're looking to bring it all together. It is overwhelming to study astrology on your own. So if you want organization, structure, and coherence, what you're getting in this program is going on 15 years of training astrologers, 15 years of developing curriculum that has in mind the overwhelm that many people experience. And this program is structured year 1, year 2, year 3, however far you want to go with our curriculum, to give you an organized, structured, coherent way of understanding the history and language of astrology from both ancient times to modern times in all of the vastness that the field includes. And also, as we go, we want to give you the confidence that you are a part now of an astrological lineage. Astrology has always been practitioner-based. Coming through Nightlight, you are going to have the opportunity to feel aligned with a lineage. If you like my work, if you feel aligned with the way I speak the language, then this might be a good reason to come study with us. Now, if you're seeking the why behind things, if you're like, yeah, that's interesting, I get it, I understand, but why? Why signs? What's the difference between a sign and a house? Why do they ever come up with a sign and a house? What's the distinction philosophically? Why does Mars represent this? Why does Mars in this sign represent that? If you are someone who feels empowered by understanding the why behind things, you are going to love this program, because that's how I am as a teacher. That's how I am as a person. And that's what this program is really all about. Number 5, you are looking for astrological community. Look, I think Nightlight is unique in terms of the kind of warmth, acceptance, safety, and inclusiveness that our community includes intellectually, spiritually. We are really pride ourselves on being a peaceful kind of family. I'm a Cancer, right? So it's kind of a family-oriented environment. So anyway, I will end it there. If you check any of those boxes, you may want to consider studying with us. Now, I'm going to take you over to 2 things. I want to show you the dashboard. So here is the Thinkific page. You're going to join this. And on your dashboard, you're going to find any courses that you've enrolled in at Nightlight. And there are many, so you may end up in being involved in multiple courses. And you'll find that they're all there on your dashboard. Click on one of them and it will take you in. You're going to find that on the left-hand side, there's orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar, all the technical stuff you need to know when you join the course. And then you're going to find that when you go through the lessons, that the lesson includes the video, the audio, the slides, the transcripts, the Q&A box text if you couldn't make it live and see what people were talking about, flashcards, homework, a bonus PDF with all sorts of additional recommended reading, bonus videos, additional video links for bonus material. So every single time that you want to visit something within the course, everything is nicely organized. So you can see here, I'm going to pause this before it starts going, but you can embed the video right there. It's embedded and you can watch it. And then if you wanted to, you could also, right here, you could also download the video and watch it on your own device. And that's same for the audio as well. And then as you go, you'll see all of the lessons are laid out. The study sessions are also recorded if you can't make those live. So everything is nicely arranged on the website for you. And that makes it a course that if you wanted to take 3 years to accomplish, you could take 3 years to accomplish. If you want to take it for the sake of getting certified, you have the full year plus an additional year to take the exam. So 2 years total that we give people if you're on a professional track. But most people complete the program in a year. And a lot of people, over 50% of our students go on to our year 2 and then our year 3 and Horary programs as well. Now, final thing I'm going to show you is right here. You're going to find here is the enrollment options at the bottom of the first year course page. Again, this is at nightlightastrology.com, and you're going to click on the first year course, go to the bottom. The early bird payment saves you several $100s off the cost of the course. That's available till May 15th. Early bird installment plan saves you on the installment plan, regular cost of the course. That's also only available until May 15th. And then need-based tuition. All of our programs include a need-based option where we give you a sliding scale and we say, you pick your monthly tuition number within this sliding scale, which is greatly reduced off the normal tuition price. That is for people who are on a fixed or limited income, receiving disabilities, single mom, whatever the case might be. We want to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying astrology. So you don't have to feel any shame. If that is you, if you need help, if you want to take this, but you need to make it work within a tight budget, we get it. Times are tough right now. We don't think people should be priced out of studying a sacred subject like astrology. So we've been offering need-based pricing for 15 years. Nightlight is a donation-based school. It started that way. We have a sliding scale, so it's kind of like donation. You get to choose your rate anyhow. So if that's something that will help you, please use it. Thank you for listening to this. I hope it gave you a really deep and comprehensive introduction to what the course is all about and why you might find it exciting to come study with us starting at the end of June. So any questions you have about the program as you're visiting the course, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We'll be glad to talk about anything that you have questions about. We are here and we have a wonderful staff of people at Nightlight who will be a part of your learning experience and are all glad to help you. All right, that's it. We'll see you again later. Bye.